But so therefore, I think for every film, you need to start over and rethink. And for me, it's like what I learned over like my experience of getting older and getting more experience is that I just need to be more and more able to refresh and erase my experience
like
in a way.
Don't hang on to stuff.
Exactly. It's like, because now I know how to do things, so I could easily like apply all this experience on the next project, which is, it's not always good, especially not in the beginning. I think in the beginning you need to be an open paper.
Hey everyone, how's it going? This is your host Yoshino. You're listening to episode 107 of ours Decoded. In this episode, we get the opportunity to talk to Oscar-winning cinematographer Linus Sandgren. You might have seen some of his films from La La Land, and most recently, out in theaters right now, First Man with Ryan Gosling. I'm here right now with filmmaker Saman Kesh.
What's up, dude? How you doing?
What's up?
I'm good. I'm feeling good about this episode. Linus is a good friend, and it was really fun to sort of like get to know his origin story. You know, I felt like I knew so much about him already, and suddenly I was like, I don't know Jack.
Well, you've also worked with him.
Yeah, we talk about kind of where he came from in Sweden, his music video upbringing, and then of course for those of you really interested in finding out about Ryan Gosling getting sick, spinning in circles, our First Man section kind of starts halfway. So if you're in a hurry, you can skip to that. But if not, yeah, let's jump in.
Do you want me to put an arm out for you like this, or?
I don't know. How close should I be?
Yeah.
It's like,
That's a smart
This would be
thing.
better
We're just jealous
so that I
because
could-
you're pulling out some Japanese ingenuity.
But yeah.
thanks for being here. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks
Nice to
for
see
coming,
you.
man. I guess we can just start off with how you got into cinematography and how you have transformed within the process of learning the craft and understanding it for yourself.
Well, when I was little, I was like always drawing. Did a lot of like comics, and I had a friend. We did a lot of stuff that other guys didn't really do, more like playing at home. And we didn't like playing soccer so much, and everyone else did that. So we did a lot of comic books. We did Super 8 films. My dad had a Super 8 camera. We did small like James Bond films and Indiana Jones, that kind of stuff when we were 12. And that was just playing around though. I like drawing, and I got a camera, so I took like photos, quite a lot of photos, and
How young were you when you took photos?
that was from 15, I think. But then in high school, I went to like science high school, and I was interested in nature and like biology and stuff as well. And when we did like school projects, I would be the one who made the actual like book after, like that, where everyone's work was presented in this book, and I took the photos from the projects for them. So I didn't really need to do any biology sort of projects, but rather I did the actual documentation of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, which was a way for me to both feel more creative in the project, but also it was a little bit probably like an escape as well.
Yeah.
Like, so I did all these things, and I was very confused on like what to work with, because to me that wasn't work. It was more like fun. But as well, my dad actually worked with film. Like when I grew up, he worked in like distribution, and he bought films. So he went around on like festivals all around the world and bought films, Swedish and Scandinavian rights for the films. And that was like, Kurosawa, Kieslowski, Jim Jarmusch, it would be like David Lynch, or like more like indie movies, but quality films that potentially could make money in Sweden, because in Sweden, people watched movies from all over the world, actually could be commercial successes, even French films or Italian films, and we had like free tickets to the movie theaters. We can go, me and my brother, and the thing was like growing up with that, and also him coming home when we got VHS, right, which we didn't have in the beginning, but we got a VHS player, and he brought home all those films he distributed. When I was homesick, I was like watching all these movies, and it was films that maybe my friends didn't really watch. It was more like grown-up films, like films for adults. So it was a great film school for me, I think, without thinking about it. I just watched it because I didn't have anything else to watch.
Would your father? He had all these films, and then he was kind of through his job, also like indirectly educating you, but would you also have discussions with him about the films, and then he would try to break it down for you, and then
Not at that time when I was little, but later we had he was like my best friend. We talked all the time. When I started working with film, we watched movies and we could call each other like, "Oh, did you see this film?" And we talked about them and what we liked about them or not. But as a kid, I grew up with like my parents weren't at all like sort of parenting me much. Like me and my brother, we were like we had our free choices to do whatever you want to become or educate yourself in, and they didn't push anything on us. On the contrary, actually, I remember my dad watched like a film that was like not for kids on the tip. It was like probably an action movie or something he watched, or some sort of thriller. And he told me to go into my room because I couldn't stay up and watch. So he was a little bit even like protective, like a parent, like old school parent, that I shouldn't watch that, But I remember he took me to E.T., the premiere of E.T. I remember
E.T. Phone Home.
Wow.
it was amazing, and
Swedish premiere, E.T.
Yeah.
And you guys never dub stuff, right? It's
No.
like,
E.T. Phone Home.
subtitles.
it's
yeah.
crazy how
Yeah.
different countries have different.
Yeah. No dubbing. But I never thought about like in whatever I played with when I did those Super 8 movies. I never thought about that being like, I aspired to become a cinematographer. I didn't know that was like even a job. Like we just made the movies. So, but later I went into I like biology. I was really into like whales and dolphins and stuff because I was also into scuba diving, and so I applied for biology and I applied to an art school. And so that's where I got in, not to biology.
You didn't get to biology?
I didn't get in.
do you think your initial passion for like the sciences and sort of like theoretical and technical approaches, you kind of molded that into your approach into cinematography?
Yeah, I think I feel like I was shaped like as a kid, like all my like inspiration of like nature, and I love like like birds, watching birds and stuff, and I love to be sailing. I was sailing with my dad a lot, and we were out in the archipelago. Like I love outdooring in general in nature, and also like I always wanted to produce images, right? Like drawing or photographing, or it's some sort of visual expression and capture as well of nature, of like the world that I love and watch. But also the science is like the science class. I love like technical stuff too. So I guess like my profession right now is very much a combination of all those things that I actually love to do.
Yeah. I mean, just to relate to you on that aspect, initially I went into like a kinesiology major, and then I was going to switch over to marine biology.
A marine animal underwater.
And I think there's certain theoretical and technical processes that I'm really stimulated by, but me personally, I think my mind more wanders in the abstract. I know Saman is like, I don't know, are you?
Yeah, I see.
Saman knows me really well, so anyways, I guess I could relate to you. I was like, what's this guy laughing at over here?
I think that is interesting, yeah, because I used to want to be like in computer engineering and stuff, and I wasn't smart enough. Like I'm kind of a smart dumb person. Like I'm not academically very good like at anything. But I think, like, just thinking about some of my work, like the Basement Jacks video, even, it's like I kind of like pretending that I know how programming works and things. And I kind of know a lot about how things function. I just don't do them, or I'm not the best at that. Well, so I think I took a passion that I was like, I'm not probably the best at that. I'm the best at making shit up in my head, right? So like, but somehow, I don't know, it's fascinating. But I never thought of it like that, where like the things that we don't end up going and doing, somehow that just we carry with us.
Yeah, but I think it must be. I don't know if it is from the beginning of everything, or if it is something that you're shaped by as a kid. But because it could also be that we just like had that in us as a drive, right? But I don't know, or if it is things that you discover.
Well, think about people who fall into a profession that's like their number 2 choice. Yeah. And then they talk about their number 1 choice that they couldn't do.
All the time, yeah.
It's so many people do that. I mean, a lot of filmmakers.
Well, the same with James Cameron. Yeah.
James Cameron was an editor. What was he before that?
I heard that James Cameron's direction wasn't he a truck driver for a long time? And then he made his first film when he was 40. Is that right?
James Cameron? No, he was in 40, but yeah, I remember him just editing. He was
30s.
editing Piranha, and then the director got fired, and then he took over the movie. And then they wanted to take the cut away, and he ran away with the cut. I wish you could still do that and not go to jail.
That's awesome, yeah.
It's like now it's just clouded. You run away, they're like, we just have it on the cloud. Sorry, and so where were you? What were you at, like early 20s?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I go to this like graphic design school, like, and to get more experience of sort of work, I got a job as an assistant to still photographers. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe I'm naive or something, but it was like, oh wow, this is a job. You can like, it was amazing, like to be with these two photographers and see how they were like, they just had their own, they were their own bosses, and they did their own, like they had their own life, and they didn't depend on anyone, and they could just do their projects. And I just love that. What I learned from them is also something that was really interesting with where one was more of a pack shot type of photographer, doing a lot of stills, slide film, of like for computer magazines, kind of pack shots, a lot of, and then she did more like portrait photography, black and white.
Yeah, so like a couple? Or?
There were a couple, yeah. And she did like portrait, lots of portrait, lots of like, but yeah, no. So that was something that I suddenly felt like, wow, now this is really where I want to go.
But is there a reason why? Because it sounds like, is there a reason why you chose to do cinematography instead of photography as a career? Like, did you see back when you were first starting photography and cinematography, the direction changing in terms of making that a viable career? Because like photography now, it's much harder to sustain that career, and I feel like with cinematography, it's competitive, but
something
more of a commercially viable career path.
Right. Yeah. This opened the door for me, like the photography, and I was very much into keep working with them as an assistant, experimenting with my own stuff. So I started to take photos myself. I did experiments with double exposures, I remember, and I did like, but I was also like humbled to learn as much as possible. So I wanted to keep working with them as an assistant, but then they broke up and they couldn't afford to keep me, and I wasn't really paid well anyway. But
so this is why you're still in school?
No, I wasn't in school anymore.
Okay,
so
now
this
is right after.
Yeah. So suddenly I'm actually out of jobs because they broke up. They were a couple. There was a film shooting in Stockholm that needed like PAs. So then my dad set me up with the production people there, and I got a job as a PA. But so then I was like, because I had been also a delivery guy, and which by the way is like one of the best jobs I've ever had, because it was so nice to just be like alone and you meet people, but it's like you can decide your own path, right? But the thing is too, is like I had no idea he had like connection with the production and being on set.
Your dad was like magical. Slowly unlocked as you got older.
Yeah, actually, because he didn't want to affect me, I guess. He didn't want to like. But and I met these people, and they were really, I was just a runner, running and driving for people. But when you're on a film set, right, it's like you're in this world that is, it's just when I was playing with doing my own small movies, the world around didn't exist. You're just in that bubble. And this particular film was very fantastical, and it had like all these cool props and cool set design and stuff. And so I was really blown away by the entire film production, and especially art department and filmmaking being like potential possibilities. I was super happy being on that set as a PA.
So it like opened the doors to like the community of filmmaking.
Exactly, right? and I kept working with these guys, and I worked on another film that was about Alfred Nobel, and it was like a Finnish legendary DP shot it, and I was always like, if I didn't have to do something for production, I always went to camera department to help them, with their work, whatever they needed, like to get, booze for the Friday, whatever. But I guess I felt they were connected with me through the still photography.
I guess like, is that kind of what started happening as you were hanging out with the camera crew? Like these people became your mentors? Yeah,
and I think even if it's not like as outspoken, like mentorship where it's like, hello, I'm your mentor. It's like more like people that really have encouraged you in different ways. Could be just like kind words, just reaching out, saying things, right? So I think especially like actually those guys, Olof Holdar and Inger Wiklund, who was the still photographers, they meant a great deal to me in also encouragement for my sort of experiments that I did while I was there, but also after we kept in touch. And
do you try to take an active part in mentoring?
Oh, totally.
Your crew?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, my camera operator Devin Slininger that I work with a lot lately, he started as a second AC on a commercial with me in LA, and I just found him being very interesting because he's also studied photography, and he studied photography. He has like a master's in photography from UCLA, I think, or USC, and but he worked as a second AC. But I could tell he's like a really great like photographer in his mind, and I picked him up as a second, but then he was my first on commercials, and I encouraged him to learn more about focus pulling, and
you were kind of testing him.
Yeah, and I encouraged him to learn
him.
And how I was learned being a focus puller, because I also was a focus puller, learning from other DPs. And I think that's really important too, and it's beautiful to see as well how people develop. And now he shot his own films, as a DP. So I think that's really important. Also, just listening to others, watching other people's films, and
it's interesting because when we only worked on one project together, but even then, like I always talk, when people ask about working with you, I always say like you were kind of a mentor though too, because I think because you have age on me, you have experience on me. Even though you always were the DP, you were always like, what do you want to shoot? How do you want to do this? There were always moments where you could tell when I'm like suffering from just like crazy director anxiety, and you would know when to sort of be like, I'm going to wait for you to come out of that, or I'm going to interject and figure out. Like, remember one time I was having trouble with a client, like when we were doing a tech scout, and I couldn't focus on ideas you were pitching, and you were like, let's get the agency out of here, because I couldn't pay attention to a new idea.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that is a really important part of sort of experience that you can help other with, but on the opposite as well, it's really important to not forget that younger people have a lot of things like inspiration and ideas that are worth listening to, because you could easily also, as you get older and more experienced, I mean, you could become someone who thinks you know everything, and because you think you know everything, you know how things are being done. So
you're
therefore,
projecting like a sense of power,
and that's the worst.
Yeah,
it's really, really hard. I mean, you really always have to work with yourself to not get to that point where you're like, well, you just know everything, because then you get stuck in doing things a certain way, I think.
Yeah, you block yourself too.
Yeah.
And actually, segueing this into First Man, I thought it was really interesting, that one scene between the mother and the child, when she was saying, your father's going to go to the moon, or and he's like, oh great, can I go play outside?
It's when she was crying and the kid comes and asks his mom how she's doing. I found that so emotional.
Well, I thought that was such a poignant scene, and it's so simple, just because the viewer immediately has the realization that, okay, there's this thing that is going to change the course of history, yet from a child's eyes, they're just so focused on what they need to do. And I think that having the combination is... the combination. It makes things more
there's also
three-dimensional.
There's also an estrangement in the scene, because the father's sort of becoming less and less present for the kids, emotionally. Yeah. And so I think that also shows the disconnection on an emotional level, the sort of not able to talk about your feelings kind of thing, especially in that era. Like when the kid comes and I don't want to get sidetracked, when the kid comes and shakes his dad's hand. It's funny because like, I don't know how audiences feel about that, but that hurt my feelings, because I'm like, I'm a hugger. Like I'm like, you should be hugging and kissing your dad, But instead, it's like you've separated yourself so much that this kid is looking at you not as a kid, your son, but it's like a hello, individual. I respect you. But you're not my dad.
You tell yourself, is your father, sir? Or you're like.
That's interesting.
But it's also a more formal way of, like, old school way of how they probably had things, but since the little kid is hugging him, they have that relationship in the family as well. So it's sad. I mean, that's a sad scene.
So I guess like when did you start like popping off? Like what was your first project that you kind of got from the working your way into the camera department?
Oh well, so then I went to film school. I met a lot of friends. I made a lot of friends there, and there I was really trying to shoot every project. So I was like the cinematographer usually on every project, or a camera assistant or something. But I also did some sound boom, and then I tried to get into camera department like AC. So I became the first AC, and I worked as the first AC on commercials. And there was a mentor too. Uffe Linnaeus was a cinematographer. I sent out letters to like 20 DPs, and I got one back. And he was like, "Sure, I can help you," And I got to work with him on commercials. It was great. But I did. I also started to shoot videos with people. There was a lot of videos being shot
like
in Sweden. Music videos, yeah. So we shot a lot of music videos in the late '90s. I worked with a guy called Micke Delica. He's done a lot of videos. He was very he's done very creative projects that always were very fantastical, much more than we had budget for. He had very creative ideas, and usually kind of small movies, and especially lots of footage before and after the actual video, like of story. And
I love that.
And I quit being an AC. I've decided to be a cinematographer, but I only did videos. Like we did videos with Robin, Robin,
Yeah.
Swedish artist. And,
Those videos are dope.
But during that
Delano.
time period, it was more of a what's it called? You could probably sustain yourself more off of shooting music videos, right?
It was usually like the bigger companies, the commercial companies. They had like we worked for a company called Meccano, and they had like this division called Meccano Baby. So like Adam Berg, for example, was there, and we did videos, so much videos together that we actually started our own little company, Ian and Micke, and we did like videos for a year. But I felt also like I really missed working with other directors. It was like more fun to work around, meet other people, and so I did short films and stuff. And then I did a short film with two guys, Måns and Björn, Måns Mård and Björn Stein. They interviewed me for a short film they had written, and it was like a project and we made a 45-minute short film, which then actually was distributed in the movie theaters,
wow.
2 prints. Yeah.
Wow. Shortest movie ever.
Yeah, but they actually got, they pay you pay half a ticket for it.
Oh,
so
wow.
that was actually a commercial short film. However, that was pretty
I
good.
wish we could
Yeah,
just do that.
it was
That's
pretty cool.
interesting. Yeah.
It was like the first time I think anyone had like just a single short film in the company.
We make so much money just making 45-minute movies.
Yeah, but it was fun. People sort of liked it, and then I did like a TV movie thing with a Danish director, coming of age type of very experimental. We shot on like mini DV, but then we projected it on a wall and shot it on 16 and graded it crazy. It was really funky. It was super.
insane.
Yeah, it was really insane. And it was very like Dogma style, like very raw. And they smoked pot and they had sex, and it was like all kinds of like, it was kind of a. And then those same guys, directors, got to direct their first movie, which was my first movie as well.
Where is this?
Storm.
In the timeline of Linus, where is this?
This is 2004. We're shooting it. So since they're 2 directors, we sat together like this, like we are sitting now, and going through the script. One of them wrote the script, the other one co-wrote or helped. But Måns Mård wrote the script, and Björn is like the editor in the team. And the 2 directs like every second day usually, and one is the boss every second day, and then the other one is the sort of supporting director. But throughout it was like production designer was his first movie, costume designer was her
So
first
everybody
movie.
you guys were all jumping into a new world.
Yeah, it was amazing to like do our first film together, and we shot it on 35.
Like
very
was
ambitious.
the AD first time too, or did you get some
I think
people
he was
had-
actually maybe. He's been ADing, but I think maybe it was his first movie. I don't remember. And then we were nominated for the Swedish sort of Oscar equivalent, or the Swedish Film Institute TV Broadcast Award called the Guldbagge, which I won actually the cinematography, which was my first. That was my breakthrough. I think they got a lot of attention from Hollywood, really to do something.
Yeah.
So I went here to see agents, and I met agents, and they were like, "Come here and start working."
No, and then that's when you.
So, question for you: when you started doing commercials, how were you able to dance between all the mediums? Did you do commercials, music videos, movies, or did you kind of like have a moment where you just did one?
No, I did everything together, and it's nice to mix. For me right now, it's like that's the best. I just did a video with Brantley Guterres in New York with Paul McCartney, which was super fun. And I love doing everything. It's like it's better to do different things, and I even have a need to like do other things than films too. I think to get my
exercise.
To get your brain to rest.
I never understood, like even in film school, I remember teachers would look at me and say, "Do you know it's impossible to do all three? Just focus on one." And I remember being like, "I don't like this."
I think it's the opposite. I really do. I think,
I
or
agree.
whatever you need, I guess.
Yeah.
But I feel like after a film, if I do a movie, use so much of inspiration into this project that I need new inspiration. I can't just go into the same type of project. I need another type of project to get inspired. Yeah, and maybe I don't need to do like necessarily commercials or music videos. I could also do something completely different, obviously, like paint or something. But
you have guitar. You told us a little bit about your guitars.
Yeah, but exactly. So,
do you still like watching movies?
Yeah.
Or is that harder?
It's harder. It is harder to take the time, I think.
It's hard, very hard for me.
To focus, yeah. I don't know, it's almost like you just want to not touch a camera. You don't want to like, I guess it's the consumption. Like, it's so much everywhere. It's like whatever you open iTunes library and it's like, oh, it's so many films to choose from. And I don't know, but I think it has to do with my work as well. If I wasn't shooting movies,
I'm curious because I definitely feel I'm already like exhausted of watching new movies, and I used to feel guilty. And I remember you bringing it up to me because I felt guilty for a long time. I'm like, why don't I want to make stuff? I like writing. I like watching old movies. I love buying my Criterion, and treating them like studying. But when it comes to just casual consumption, like, it's not my input anymore. Like, my input is so many other things.
That's it too. Absolutely. I'm not looking at other films, contemporary films, for inspiration. For example, I don't like to look at like other contemporary artists for my own work. Like to try to find inspiration. I always find inspiration elsewhere, like in either old films or like completely different, like super old school art or something, or things that has no relation to my own work. You know?
I think
I can't like get inspired by a similar thing to what I'm doing. It has to be something completely different.
That's why I like video games, and sometimes everyone always laughs about it, but I'm like, no, man,
totally.
Like, because it's about participation, and I love that idea of films getting like participatory. When you watch it, you're involved.
What do you think draws both you back to filmmaking, specifically you as a director and specifically you as a cinematographer?
I think there's many things. I think making films in any form, like as a cinematographer or any crew member, I think itself is such a privilege and amazing job, because you get to, I mean, there's so many things with it that is amazing, but in my work as a cinematographer, I think I like that whole challenge of coming up with ideas together and think about things in our heads and create images in our heads of what we as a group think that we want to produce, and then take that challenge to sort of light that and make that look the way we intended to. It's like that actual challenge has to do with like puzzle making and stuff. Like,
I mean, I think that goes back to the scientific and
somehow it's like that challenge is interesting, but also, you know, like the relationship you get with the actors while you're shooting. That experience from previous projects intrigues you to want to go into another project to get that communication and you know, that instant communication you get on set when you're shooting something, and you get, you know, the communication you get between each other, and also with the director, and learn from new directors.
It's almost like the discovery is really exciting to you.
It is, maybe it's that.
But I think that like, so coming from a director's perspective, like my forefathers of like film, or like people like Fincher, this era of directors that like it's kind of bygone, because it's, you know, film needs to be much more collaborative now to survive, and much more participatory. And, you know, I noticed even with working with you, there's like working with people who are excited to discover, but also like excited to get in your brain, but then also challenge you, is this phenomenal thing that I don't think most directors, maybe many directors don't like. But it's like I'm learning giving up control always makes me a better director. And just being open, as you were talking earlier, just really being open and absorbing, because everything you are you, so everything that comes into you will come out
Yeah, I mean,
a certain way. But I find that the discovery part of it, I think, is what is like we're explorers.
We are explorers together, and you create something that comes out of there is always a result of the group. You know, even if
it's a group energy.
It is a group energy, and it's like, because you're dependent on each other no matter what. It's like, even for a director, if he has another DP, it's going to look different than the other DP.
Yeah.
It's like, even if he doesn't want to, it's like, it will just do that.
Yeah.
So it will become, and that creation is interesting. It's like, it's actually like a group of artists comes together and creates a sculpture together, and see what that's going to be, instead of having a single auteur. Even if the director is sort of the guide and the leader, it's still like that group effort that is really
it's interesting,
intriguing.
I think is, you know, when I think like our generation, I think like Damien's only like a couple of years older, but it's like we're those commentary generation. You know, we grew up with commentaries and bonus extras and stuff, and you hear about so much control, and so it's interesting to see, you know, growing up and realizing some of that is kind of false. Some of that is like, you know, because even when you watch a Kubrick movie, who instilled the most sense of control, all his movies have different spirits. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's the writer, the musician, the editor,
and the
actors. And it's like, whether he wants to admit it or not, or would admit it or not, like, you're totally right. Like, I think my job as a director is never to go do my bidding. It's kind of more like I'm the guiding force of group energy. Yeah,
and then and that's what draws you into new projects. I think is like, it's a very inspiring environment to be in, to work in with other people, but then I feel also like it's interesting to try new challenges, like new type of films and new different type of collaborations. And it's.
Question for you: how do you jump from a project to project? It's
primarily director. It could be any director that I'm just curious on, but also if the project feels like something that feels like a new challenge to me, and not like exactly what I just did, for example. Or I don't care so much about what exactly the product we do for a commercial, or what the film is about. It's like to get to know this creator. You know? And this interesting.
There's always kind of a learning process, a little bit, bit of a like, once again, it's like you're a chemical and he's a chemical. What do you get when you combine us?
Exactly, it's interesting. I'm curious. You know, I'm a really curious person, and I love those kind of things, and that's lovely. I mean, I met so many interesting people, not only directors, but like producers and other crew members that are really interesting. You know, if you understand each other and then you could like create things together. But if I'm like if I don't have a clue what the director is looking for, and I'm like all about just doing a technical thing, like doing the film the way I want to do it or whatever, like then I haven't understood him, and then it's going to fall apart. So it's better to both be able to, the ability to listen and try to understand a director and his vision, and be open to not get, because it's also could be really annoying sometimes, like if a director has a very different view, or has like, all of us have obviously an idea of how things work, or how things are supposed to be, and especially when you get into a project, you start to learn how you're going to do things, and then perhaps in that moment when you already have solved everything, and you think you know everything, and you think you solved everything, then if the director comes in and changes something that is really annoying for you because it's like turning everything upside down, that could be extremely frustrating, obviously, for anyone. But then how to handle that, like how do you go back and solve the problem, you know? So I think the ability to sort of communicate and work together, but the key for all of us, the rest of us, is to work with that vision that the director has. So if his vision is one thing, then you just have to try to figure out how to get there. And to get there is how to understand. You have to learn how the director works, or how you know.
How important is malleability to you?
What's a malleability? What's that?
Like being
shapeable,
pliable, being being able to adapt. Adaptability.
Yeah, malleability sounds more controlling.
Or
adaptability.
They mean the same thing.
They do. For some reason,
like
malleable seems more like.
No, I don't think. I mean, I don't think there's negative connotations of to saying malleable? Is there?
I think so. If someone said I'm malleable, I'd be like, "Fuck you, bro." I'd do what I
Really?
want.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
I think
interesting.
so.
Okay, well then.
I mean, how do you think? Am I weird?
Well, in the edit, we'll just be
I guess
like
you
when I
didn't
say
even know.
malleable.
I don't even know the word.
In the edit, when we say malleable, it'll be like, yeah. What do you think about malleable?
Adaptability.
Adaptability.
It's like your voice.
I think it's important to I think it's important to be adaptable, like to adapt to. I mean, think about it as being adaptable as a. I think being adaptable is like being soft, right? And then, or you're not adaptable, then you're like a square, and it's harder to fit in with squares or boxes, right?
Yeah.
Than softer. I think the more everyone is adaptable and listens to each other or whatever, and that is key for working with each other on a group level. But and to adapt and understand and try to like be humble to other people's ideas, and then obviously if you have a strong opinion, speak up about it, and actually try to sell it for them. Like it's about that too, right? Like, oh, but what about this idea? I think very strong about this, and then you can try to convince people that your idea is better. I think that's fine as long as you also listen. I don't mind getting in and doing like a kids movie, and see how my aesthetics applied onto this story. I have obviously an aesthetic. How does this combination work when I come in here and take this project and try to make the best out of that to become the coolest kids movie that I would never really want to watch, but I want the kids to love this, right? Or you make a film that's a comedy, and then maybe it's not the film that you normally would watch yourself, but do the best with that as a project. It's just like an architect. So
it's like making a version that you'd want to watch.
Yeah, but also like, make it as good as you can with your tools, but you want them to be pleased. So it's like when you're a great architect, I think you have obviously an aesthetic and a style, but you would also want the people that live there to want to live there. Like
exactly.
So you need to adapt to the project, and you need to adapt to the director's vision, which is the main architect. I feel like sometimes, like now after like La La Land, I felt I had an opportunity, and I knew I was going to do First Man. I had like the opportunity to not like stress for getting something else, because I can always do commercials, and I can do, I have that ability. So I could be a little bit strategic. Fuck, I can say.
How do you say it in Swedish?
Strategisk.
Okay.
Strategic.
That sounds way cooler.
Yeah, it sounds way cooler. You should just say it like that.
Yeah, strategisk. I don't try to be strategic, really.
Being too strategic, I think sometimes
locks you in.
Blocks with improvising.
Yeah, exactly.
I really never do that. I mean, but I think it's important though to not get locked into projects. Everyone seems to like throw a lot of projects up in the air and see what falls down, like what comes to you, and which one do we do? And it could be the same for me. It's like, I have meetings with directors, and there's so many great fun projects. They're still not happening. They're just like possibilities.
Yeah,
exactly.
For all of us. Yeah. And I meet people, and it's like, wow, I hope this happens, and I hope this happens. And then another project comes in, and it's like, and then you're hired on another film, and then it's like, oh, sorry guys, I had to take this one. I think that's better, to be like open to anything, really.
Well, it's interesting because with Damien seems very auteur based, where everything seems written by him, or at least, I imagine he's going to do that. So it was interesting to jump onto a script that wasn't his. And I'm curious if the thought process was similar, where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to keep moving, keep doing stuff, and maybe
I think
my other movies will.
Yeah, and he's writing. He's writing films that other people are directing.
Yeah.
He would probably be open to, producing for people or doing
that
things like
That
this.
seems to answer almost your adaptability question too, a little bit, because I think that's just sort of a climate change in the business. Like, if you are not adaptable, you won't work.
Yeah.
Like, it's just kind of feels like that.
Yeah.
I think that is the best way to successful projects too, and successful life, to focus on your relationships and the.
As much like I'm emotionally antisocial. I'm emotionally an introvert. I'm very good at being an extrovert, but like there are times where I'm like very disconnected from everybody else. Like I feel like Ryan Gosling in First Man sometimes, where I'm just like, everybody else is very strange to me. I just want to go do this one thing.
Neil, when you learned you were going to command this flight, were you surprised, overjoyed?
I was pleased.
Okay, but how would you compare this feeling to winning an automobile or being selected as an astronaut? I was pleased.
You can't kind of force or choose. You kind of, it's just part of the process. I'm making movies. I'm going to have to work with other people. I could either not like it or like it, and I choose to like it.
Well, I think with you, at least what I've noticed, Saman, is that I think what you mean by people being strange to you is because I think you in particular, your brain processes things at an incredible rate.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, sometimes we'll have, and this is not a bad thing. Sometimes we'll have conversations and you'll be talking about something and then I'm about ready to like say something, but you were past that like 2 or 3 minutes ago. And my brain is finally catching up to that, to that like second minute. I just figured that
That's a smart
this would be
thing.
better
We're just
so that
jealous
I
because
could-
you're pulling out some Japanese ingenuity.
which is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
I don't
noticed
think it's
that
a
too.
bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just how you process information.
Yeah, I'm sure when I'm 50, I'll probably be balanced. When I slow down enough, then everyone can catch up.
And I'll just be double slow.
Small. Okay, so I want to talk about First Man before we lose you.
Gemini 8, we're about to have loss of signal. We'll pick you up over the hill for Dave's EVA.
First of all, I have to admit that I was completely surprised how that thing was shot. I really, because, I remember talking with you and you'd send me little sneaky photos with you and IMAX camera or whatever and like, NASA pass and shit. But it was like, I didn't expect it to look that way. I thought you guys had such a bold direction with the aesthetic of that film. Just like having the fucking focus out of, feeling raw, documentary style. Sometimes like, it was just so grainy. I remember watching it with my brother, and he was like, "This movie's so grainy. Like, it's crazy. How did they let them do this?"
Yeah.
Because I was really expecting like clean aesthetics. I was really expecting Damien to come and be like, "I'm gonna beat all these other space sci-fi movies," and he just went whoop, like totally different turn with you. I'm curious, like, was that a very early decision, very flat out?
Yeah,
Like,
that was early. That was like really in Damien's heart from the beginning, because it's all about like being authentic, and he felt that this story would be best told being very authentic and raw, and doing the 60s in a way like the 60s, doing this story. If we would have done it like La La Land, for example, I think it would have come out like as a completely different emotion than what it did now. And being raw and grainy and documentary style with out of focus and like zooms and I think helps the aesthetics. Like that's how we find how to do things always, right? It's like, what does this film need and why, and what happens if we do it this way? What happens if we do it that way? How early on, Damien was very inspired by that style of documentary filmmaking with an 8-ton camera with a zoom lens on the shoulder. And since it has to do with both the sort of kitchen realism at home and space, there's like that huge span of scope. It's like you're very intimate with them in the kitchen and the behind the scenes story that is very important for the emotions of the film. And then you're intimate with them as well in the spacecraft, but it's more like about claustrophobia and being very visceral and scary. And if it's authentic, if it's like your handheld Super 16 zoom in the kitchen, and then you go with that to work in his capsule, our theory was that was going to be much more powerful and scary and authentic, and hopefully feel like you're really doing it, as opposed to if you're on stage with like a nice camera and it's like.
There's something very trapped about it. Feel like just the whole idea feels like they're walking into a fucking tin can, and that like anything can go wrong. And the very first scene, where you're trapped in the thing with him. I guess you only have like little fixed rigs that you cut out to, like on the wing or whatever, the whole.
Which is sort of authentic type of photography, that's what they could do. That's like
they'd
those
have like
shots
a
they
little
had.
Super 8 attached on there.
They have small cameras that could shoot actually out of the crafts. That's also in the story, obviously, with the fly, and that's like buzzing around inside the craft, which just gives you a hint that perhaps not everyone has been super clean here, or like. And how? What about that little thing they pull out of his belt,
the little glue chunk or whatever that is.
And it's just small things of that shows how
Fragile.
fragile, how quickly they made all this stuff.
Theo, you're bouncing off the atmosphere.
Just sending out rockets so quickly, and it was sort of experimenting, you know.
Yeah, I love the way that movie looks.
But I think that's, to me, that is though the key. It's like where your limitations are in a way as an artist. Like if you look at it as an artist, it's like the limitation is that you have to adapt to the script. You can't just do La La Land out of this. Then I wouldn't be truthful to the script, and Damien wouldn't be truthful to the script. I think that's what's the interesting challenge, where it becomes a little more like an architect type of creativity, where you actually have to look at what is requested and asked for by the script, and then the vision from the directors. In my point of view, it's like the interpretation from the director of that script, like how does he feel about it? And obviously he felt that he wanted it to feel like documentary style and all that. Then I can start to suggest things like, what about, like, you know, we tested 16 and we tested 35 and we tested IMAX as well. But also thinking about the style of shooting in terms of how do we do the actors? Do we just let them roam around and we just following them around with the camera, or should we have some sort of aesthetic where documentary filmmakers also make aesthetic choices, right? If you do a documentary that you sort of script a little bit and you want to get something out of it that is especially emotional, I think you would choose to perhaps get a shot like far away from him when his family left him for going to bed. You pull out and you see a wide shot of him when he looks lonely, and he's full of space all around. It's sort of a metaphor for death and for space, and which are like visual cues and clues to the story as well. But how to do that best was, like, for me and Damien in that particular case, we were so particular about the choice of formats that we went into, like, you know, different processes of the film stocks in order to specify
I noticed the mix,
where we want
mixed grain. I would note, I'm like, dude, this is like different stocks.
Yeah, so when they're at home, we pull process it softer, and when he's at NASA, it's 35, but it's like contrasty because it's push processed. And the 16 was sort of the aesthetic in general we wanted to go after, except when they're home in Houston, it was softer. But they're subtle, but I think people feel it even if they don't understand why. They still, the audience would still feel that it feels more immersive or whatever in this type of film. So therefore, I think for every film you need to start over and rethink. And for me, it's like what I learned over, like, my experience of getting older and getting more experience is that I just need to be more and more able to refresh and erase my experience,
like,
in a way.
Don't hang on to stuff.
Exactly. It's like, because now I know how to do things, so I could easily, like, apply all this experience on the next project, which is, it's not always good, especially not in the beginning. I think in the beginning you need to be an open paper. Yeah.
Go back to being a student.
And that's where I then can get my inspiration from the director, and like and that's why the director is so important for my choices too, to who I work with, because that's what can feed me, you know, like and that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, talking about, I guess, strategy in terms of, you know, working in pre-production and then having everything laid out in pre-production, and then going into the film. How much would you say of the film for you is done in pre-production? How much would you say is done on set, like in terms of decision making? It's different for different things. It's like for the logistical part of filmmaking, which is obviously, like we know, it's like on the minute. If you can't have like an hour overtime, it's super expensive. So you need to like finish within those 12 hours you were given that day. And so for all that to work, obviously the planning is crucial. And I think a lot of the broad stroke planning is more important in the beginning of the film than during the film. And hopefully it's planned so well in the pre-production that your setups and everything you've sort of created should just work by itself. And there, in the moment, then the film's quality is made. Like everything that happens there with the actors in the moment and the choices you make there are more crucial for how the outcome of the movie is going to be quality-wise, I think.
somehow it's like, because you could have like no resources and do a great film, because it's all about the acting and
it's that little magic
the
moment.
magic that happens on set. It's like, that is the quality of the movie, I think, always. It doesn't matter, even if it started raining.
Totally.
It's like still what you made out of it in the moment, with the creation between the actor, director, the crew.
Do you think you're coming back?
We have a real confidence in the mission, and there are some risks, but we have every intention of coming back.
But you might not.
And you can feel it on set too. That's also part of like what really draws you back into wanting to do another film. It's like that moment on set is so lovely to be in, like the creation you do there. But you can also feel a lot of like satisfaction from having planned it well, like that you are on set doing that stuff and you feel like, wow, this really worked, the planning we did. So certain things are really crucial to do in the planning, but then I think it would be very empty if you just shot it then, right? So you need, it's sort of, you add a soul to it during shoot.
It's almost like, when you're prep, it's almost kind of just like, it's the framework, it's the skeleton.
Yeah.
And the magic is the beating heart, the blood vessels, the part that makes the human
that's how it works,
alive.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. I guess, particularly to First Man, like what was the pre-pro process like this, especially because there was going to be so much like
it was
replacement of
what
green
is
screen and stuff.
Yeah, what is funny is that, how the whole intention with this film was that it was supposed to feel like authentic and real and docu-style, even though they then go to places where we can't go. So they go in a spacecraft, they go up along a rocket, they go to the moon, and they go, like they do all these things where we can't actually be for real. But to make that feel authentic and real, which is the same word, but to make that feel authentic, I think that was a challenge, because you wanted to feel like really realistic, but it's not going to be realistic. It's going to be the most unrealistic locations for us to shoot in. We cannot do it for real. So. But so our idea was that the more we can do actually in camera, and that we can see in camera, the actors can see in camera, see for real, the better. So if we have a huge flight simulator, and they were in the flight simulator, and we can shoot in it, and we get all the light from it, and we can see the image, that would be perfect. That's like number one for space travel. And if we can build a set of the moon for real outdoors, and put a real moon lander there, and have them in the suits, and they're suspended by wires, but still like as much as possible looks real. So we plan out like the moon set is like Nathan Crowley, the production designer, builds this huge set in a quarry, rock quarry, that has the exact same color like the sand of the moon. And he creates craters, he builds the space shuttle there, the lunar module, and we light it with this one single source lamp that's like a 200,000 watt lamp we had them build that creates one single source. And when that is set up, we had the crew hidden behind a big black screen, and a minimal amount of camera people around the camera and director. But in one moment, when Ryan is throwing this bracelet, and he's emotional. Yeah, when he's emotional, it's just me and my camera assistant and a camera on the moon surface. And with a little bit of imagination, it's very, very easy to feel that you're actually on the moon with that strong light, and the lunar module is there. And Ryan walks up to us, and he opens his visor, and he's emotional right in front of the camera there. That is like one of those magic moments, when you're like really yourself as a filmmaker immersed in the story, like completely, because it feels like you're actually on the moon with him, And
how did you shoot that particular scene?
Huh?
How did you shoot that particular scene?
No, so we made it kind of easy for us actually in a way, even though we had to think big, because the only way to do it, we thought, was to build it outdoors, a huge set, and he had this lunar module there, and then there was a risk because it was winter, so it could have been snowing or raining, which it actually was. After one day it started to snow, so we had to push it for a week and come back. But it was still worth it, because when we got the footage there, it pretty much in the dailies looked just like we were on the moon. Looked just like the footage from their stills, the Hasselblad stills they took. And that was the idea. And then instead of being on stage with a green screen or something, it made us all like feel much more immersed in the story. So also for the actors, like in the X-15, when he's flying the X-15, when Ryan is in the X-15, outside the windows, he see the actual
Which one's
imagery.
the X-15?
The first opening sequence.
Got it.
So when all that happens on a stage with an LED screen, we have like a 180 LED screen with pre-made visual effect footage, which is a combination of aerial photography and visual effects.
And is that what we're seeing when we look out the window?
Exactly.
Whoa.
So the camera and the actors sees all that outside the windows. Over the wing as well, it's like the same thing, that imagery. So for the actors too, they would actually see what they were going through.
So they were kind of like a flight sim almost.
It was like a flight simulator, and the only difference is that the screen was 30 feet away. So when you for the camera, it was like we could rack focus to it, and it had the proper sort of depth of field. And also we used it for the interactive lighting and for reflections in their helmets and stuff.
Do you think like building a sandbox? Because it's like I always wonder about that. You know, I haven't made a narrative yet, but it's like when I have these little tastes of it in the shorts I do, it's like kind of like building a sandbox to put everybody in, and it like whatever you're replacing, just trying to make sure that there's enough of a reality present so that like everyone's feeling. Do you think that's very important?
I think that's really important, and I think. Both for the performances that they feel I've even heard actors who would turn down films because it's too much blue screen. It's really hard to act in like a green screen stage. So I think that itself, that the more everything looks authentic for the acting, it's much better, and for us filmmakers to find the shots and to like work in the environment properly. But then for the visual look of the films, I think over the years you realize like things that are very visual effect heavy could easily become like dated, right? So that and I think in this case, 50% or more green screen in the image is hard to make it look great, I think.
Yeah.
In this case, we could have like 50% or more screen, but it's not a green screen, it's actually the imagery.
There's still something to work with.
Yeah, and it interacts with them. You see reflections in their eyes, whatever.
Yeah,
it's all there,
That was fascinating, because I could never tell what was like replacement reflections, what was real.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously did visual effects in post-production as well to the footage, but it was a great help for them to have, because many shots are not touched at all, and then some shots are added to, or there's visual effects done in the film. It's just that while we were shooting it, we saw it all like in camera. Like we could see it all in camera. Like we see the space when they go out into space and they leave Earth. You see Earth pass by, disappearing, and it's all black outside the window. You know, it's like being in the craft with them, seeing that. It felt like you were there, really. It was an easy thing.
The dark stuff was definitely very, like, because the theater would just go black. You know, like you'd see light, and then it would just go dark, and then there's nothing. Like, you're like, what am I looking at? This is scary. You know,
it's like James Turrell had one of those exhibitions in blackness. It was really cool. I went to that actually. You go into this black room, and then you're like, you don't know what to expect, and you're sitting there, and you start to see images. You know, in this James Turrell exhibition. Yeah. You start to see images. You're like, do you see something there? Yeah, isn't it down in the left corner? Something, light coming on or something? And then you just end up after 20 minutes, you exit, and you're like, it was just black.
Yeah,
it's all in your head.
You're making it up. Yeah, you're basically tripping.
Yeah.
I think like in movies too, like when with him spinning, like that the capsule, when the capsule's spinning when he's attached to the dock. I remember just thinking, oh my God, like humans are not oriented to move that fast. And
was he actually doing that?
Well, in the Gemini, no, he was in this craft, and we spun the light to have the effect on the actors, and we also had like it was like shaking a lot, the actual craft. And then the exterior shots of the craft were on a rotisserie rig that could spin, so that was spinning quickly. So, but because you're into cutting, you believe that he's going through the same thing, right? But we couldn't spin the actors that fast, you know. But he was spinning in the multi-axis gimbal.
Yeah, that was crazy. Was that ever sped up, or was he really spinning that fast?
No, he's spinning in it in the speed he's spinning in when you see the close-ups of him, and then it's a stuntman spinning faster, like on the wide shots.
Oh, okay.
But in the close-ups, it feels fast too because you're on a lens, right? So it's. He got like motion sick and stuff we were like shaking a lot in the crafts. The X15 shook a lot, you know.
How was he? How did he deal with that? Would he get mad or anything, or he would just?
No, he's the sweetest guy. But it was hard for.
It's physically demanding.
Yeah, it's physically demanding, and he's like in every scene almost. So I mean,
what was it like shooting? I kept asking, like, when you guys shot the family stuff, there's such a home video vibe. Like sometimes the only kind of montages that exist in the movie are like these little family bits, you know, where they're chasing, and there's a little bit of Terrence Malick-y vibes and stuff. But like, what was that like? Did you guys intentionally create like, hey, instead of planning these shots, let's just create a family and fuck around, or what was it?
No, that was smart by Damien too. I mean, in general, he wanted to shoot the entire film chronologically, except that all the space stuff was shot last.
Yeah.
So all Earth stuff was shot chronologically, so it starts with his. But before that, we had 3 weeks of rehearsals where Damien asked to have certain sets ready, like the cabin ready first, and then the Armstrong house, that was like the Houston bigger house, ready in the rehearsals, so that we could go in there with the kids actors and Claire and Ryan and play around, you know, and just get to know each other and have them get to know each other and play, and we would be there with just like Damien and me and a 16mm camera shooting the rehearsals in a way that made the kids get familiar with the camera and being there and just getting to know each other. So a lot of that footage is actually shot in these rehearsals, like including when he's like singing the lullaby for his daughter, and it's from there, and also when they play around, that's like you said, the Terrence Malick style stuff. But then also in the editing, you know, Tom Cross and Damien choose to use footage even more than planned that were sort of in between. You know, you readjust with the zoom. You know, we readjust for, especially in the press conference, we adjusted for a new character.
Yeah,
and it wasn't really meant that the zoom was going to be used, but he used a lot of that, or he could even prefer a shot that's a little out of focus, or adjusting for focus, or
there's like one take of a guy's response, or the whole thing is out of focus until the end.
I like that because it's part of like building up that authenticity of like
you don't know what to expect. Everything's reactive, not proactive.
Exactly. And the more you felt that way as an audience, the better. So therefore it's better, you know, even though the shots are worse, you know, or like it's not the perfect. And
worse is a judgment.
Exactly. But I really encourage people, if they do films, to do rehearsals like beforehand like that. It was a really lovely, also to get to know each other, you know.
I usually ask just like macro perspective about like advice for creatives, you know, someone who wants to pursue a career in the arts, you know, what advice would you give to them?
It's a good question. There's so many different type of arts too. I mean, if you're an artist where you express just your own things, I think, I don't know, depends if you have a lot that comes from inside of you, but I guess everybody needs experience from things in order to have things to tell. I think to anything. Is it
like practice, or what is that?
No, like experience life, like experience anything in life to your work, right? It's you get your inspiration from life, really. I mean, that's the key. You need inputs, any kind of inputs, but it could be anything. It could also be lonesomeness in a dark room,
which is my favorite.
I mean, if I talk like broad stroked, I think that's key for creating things, is to go out and find inspiration. In the work of filmmaking, I think it's also a lot about being, you know, open-minded and look for other people's ideas, and, you know, the collaboration of different creative ideas is key for me. Like, I need that from everybody around me, you know. I think.
So like connection is kind of like, would you say like the film community connection is kind of your fuel?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But also life, like in general, like anything, like even like, because it's experience.
Like what's a weird thing that you never would have thought?
But even like just swimming or something in the ocean, maybe, and you see something like a dolphin comes up, and you come back home, and then that experience itself may be magic in itself, but also would reflect on your work later.
Okay, so then you can answer it like real quick.
Okay.
What's next for you? Like not necessarily project wise, but emotionally, what are you feeling like right now? Like what's your steps forward right now?
That's a good question. I think it is just to, find new experiences and find new. I mean, I really enjoy working with new people and finding new inspiration in that and in.
So is it like maybe a little bit of rediscovery for every project?
I think so. It's totally.
So you're just gonna like be open and look for the next thing.
Yeah, and not like, I was offered another musical and I felt like that was a little too close to what I've just sort of.
You're an explorer, dude. You can't
retread. I need to find new things.
Mess with the map.
Yeah, and that's more what feeds me is like exploration. Yeah, and actually, like we talked about early on, it's like my love for sort of whales and dolphins and those things in exploring the oceans it seems to be so rich of things that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like exploring space, right?
Yeah.
But so that part of me is probably affecting like my way of finding projects too and looking
Well, I think
for
you're a
projects.
scientist, so you have a hypothesis and you want to
Yeah,
basically you're finding your new hypothesis.
You're a cinema scientist.
Cinema scientist.
Cinematist.
Yeah.
Cinema scientist.
I love that.
But yeah, so you're like finding your next hypothesis and then you will go on that adventure.
Exactly. Nice.
Please tell me we can go make a Free Willy reboot.
Yeah.
So what'd you think about the episode, man?
I loved it. I was, I'm surprised how much I learned. I guess my favorite thing was him talking about how you should refresh between every project. That was my favorite thing, not bringing baggage into the next project and like kind of starting over.
Yeah, I think that brings us back to that idea of the childlike sensibility, and even we were talking about earlier about how his father kind of, gave him the space to understand his creative process himself, right? Even though his father was in the film industry.
Also, you being wanting to be a marine biologist was pretty dope. But
glad that you found that to be interesting.
So anyways, thank you for listening to this episode. We did a couple of cool sound music things and, we like it. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, and if you'd like to donate to the podcast, please go to our website, artistdecoded.com. There's a donate link on there that directs you to our PayPal. And yeah.
And if you want to follow us on Instagram,
you can find me at Yoshino Studios, and you can find the Artist Decoded Instagram at Artist Decoded.
And if you want to follow Linus, it's at Linus Sandgren _DP. And for myself, Saman Kesh, it's at Saman _Kesh. Follow us.
Don't get a ticket.